Welcome to the Training Portal podcast, where we delve into the heart of growth and transformation, both personal and professional. I'm your host, Melissa Mostert, and every fortnight, I'll be sharing a meaningful conversation over coffee with industry leaders, innovators, and changemakers who are helping to shape the future of South Africa. In each episode, we'll uncover stories of passion and impact, stories that inspire and challenge us to think differently about development, innovation, and community upliftment. Whether you're dedicated to education, seeking personal growth, or driven by a desire to make a difference, this podcast is your companion on that journey to continuous development. The Training Portal podcast is your source of knowledge and insight, guiding you through the ever-evolving landscape of development in South Africa. Today we're joined by a powerful advocate, academic, and changemaker, Laetitia Fourie. With a background in law and a passion for human rights, Laetitia's journey has taken her from a legal professional to academia, where she now shines a spotlight on disability inclusion, particularly the lived experiences of people with albinism. What started as research on disability in the workplace has evolved into a far-reaching mission to educate advocates and drive policy change. From launching educational initiatives and contributing to national and international legal debates, to working on a book and spearheading an upcoming international conference on albinism, she is shifting narratives, dismantling stigma, and demanding justice for people with albinism across Africa and beyond. Today we'll explore her story, the systematic challenges people with albinism face, and how we can all become part of the change. Please welcome Laetitia Fourie. Laetitia, thank you so much for joining us today on the Training Portal podcast. It is an absolute pleasure to have you with us.
Well, thank you so much, Melissa, for having me. I feel really honored to be here today. Thank you.
So how about you get us started? Tell us more about where you're from and what inspired you for this journey.
I was born and bred in Dordrecht in the Eastern Cape, but please don't ask me where Dordrecht is. And I completed my basic schooling there and I matriculated from Allowell North, and then I went to study law at the University of the Free State, after which I did my master's. And I continued my journey in master's now in mercantile law, specifically in labor law. And after which I then pursued a career as a lawyer, after which I was admitted as an attorney. And today I'm a lecturer at the Faculty of Law of the University of the Free State. And how that started was I was approached by the University of the Free State because of my postgrad qualifications. And when I started there, I was initially first lecturing a whole different set of various modules. And as time progressed, I actually moved into the field of labor laws, and also that's where I also focused on disability rights.
Okay.
And I would say basically, and in 2021, I became the director of the Center for Labor Law at the faculty, and we offer short learning programs at the center, and that's my pride and joy. And recently, the Faculty of Law established a disability rights unit, which specifically focuses on raising awareness and advocacy for persons with disability. So basically that is my background and where I'm at the moment, and what actually teaching was never in my plan, but I believe that I'm at the right place and doing the work that I'm supposed to do. Yes.
So like you said, teaching was not part of the plan. How did that come about?
So, as I was practicing as an attorney, I got this opportunity at the Department of Mercantile Law, and I was first hesitant to, should I do this? Should I not do this? I remember the day where I was standing when I was saying I would never become a lecturer in my life. And that is just an example of never say never. And life just really does not always turn out like you think it would. And when I started my career at the university, at first it was very daunting to teach, but then I realized that the teaching aspect together with the research aspect and having the background of my career in law actually assisted in making a difference in both of the spaces, in academia as well as having it flow into making a real change. Yes.
So you completed both your LLB and LLM cum laude, which is amazing. What kind of mindset, and drive does it take to achieve something like that?
I would say double D, discipline and dedication. That's very, very important. I must say, if I'm honest, during my first semester of varsity, it was not a smooth sailing. It was not a cum laude first semester at all because of social life and, you know what I mean? It's university life, right? But I must say, when I found my rhythm during my studies, I realized that it's very important to have a balance between your lectures, your assignments, and at the time I was also working as an assistant at the faculty. So I had to really balance that, and for your own well-being, to make sure that you also balance your personal life, keeping healthy, having healthy lifestyle together with your studies. And I had to put in a lot of hours, long hours. I had to give up a lot of my social activities. So it was really dedication and really a disciplined time in my life. And something else as well is, I think, also engaging with the material and trying to understand it instead of memorizing it really contributed to reaching that level, because it's not about intelligence. It doesn't mean that you have to be smart in order to get your degree in cum laude. It really has to do with dedication and just really be disciplined. Yeah.
And if you had to give any sort of advice to any young people, especially those who have disability, that are interested in pursuing law or even advocacy, what sort of advice would you give them?
I think very important is to identify your strengths and to identify what it is that you want to do and to align your career path with your strengths, because you need to be very intentional in today's high unemployment, the economy that we're currently in. It's very important to be intentional with your studies. From the onset, you need to know, okay, what is my passion? What drives me? What am I good in? And then in that regard only, you focus as to what you would like to do. And I think that is very important. That is some advice that I would give to anyone who wants to pursue any study, not only law, but any type of study now in this current economy.
Now, your work has increasingly focused on albinism. Why did you choose to focus on this area within disability rights?
It's actually both a personal and an academic, how can I say, experience that led me to albinism. So just to give you some background, when I was actually in my fourth year of my final study year, my boyfriend was involved in an accident and he became a quadriplegic, and that had a severe impact on my life at the time. So it made me aware of disabilities and what the challenges are of persons with disabilities, especially I had no idea what kind of world, how inaccessible the world actually was for someone with a disability. So that set in motion, for example, completing my thesis also on disabilities and accommodating a person with disability in the working environment. So that's where my focus on disabilities actually came from. And then from an academic experience where it moved to albinism was I actually attended a conference at University of Pretoria that focused on albinism. And when I visited this conference, I realized I had no idea what albinism was about. No idea. I had no idea what kind of unique experiences that they encountered on a daily basis, not only discrimination, but the stigma surrounding albinism. For example, being hunted down for their body parts. And it just made it such a unique, specific impairment, if I can use that specific word. And to see, how can I make a change? How can I bring about, what can I do to raise awareness? Because I don't know, from a personal experience, I would, for example, in the past, before I dealt with disabilities, I would, for example, not know how to deal with someone with a disability. I would not be engaging with someone with a disability because I didn't know how to approach the person. And now, and it was the same with someone with albinism. And now it has changed so much because of being aware of what their circumstances and knowing and just being educated about it. So I think that is a very important reason as to why I am pursuing this whole, the research on disabilities, this whole journey, yes.
And what is some of the biggest misconceptions that you have encountered regarding albinism, and why do you think they persist?
So, like I just said, like even for myself, I had no idea why someone, for example, had a lighter skin color, etc. But in our African culture, the stigma that exists is because of misconceptions that exist from in an African culture, for example, where a person is born with a white skin in a black community, for example. The person is seen as being cursed, probably, or perhaps the mother of the baby had an affair. And also there are these dangerous myths that their body parts has magical elements. And unfortunately, due to the poverty that people live in, and knowing that something would carry some magical element that would, for example, alleviate poverty, you can imagine in a country where there's a lot of culture and a lot of tradition, that is something that is really an issue still in our country. And I think it's based on specifically where we are based and also the different cultures that we live in. Something else that I've also realized regarding misconceptions with persons with albinism is that we do not understand the fact that how sensitive they are to light and to sun and the UV rays of the sun, and because of the lack of melanin in their skin. And that has a real impact on them in a working environment. And especially now with climate change as well, the increase of heat and
UV
rays, it really has a severe impact. And something else that I also believe why it continues to persist is the fact that because of the traditions and the culture, the stigma when a baby is born with albinism, the children are hidden away. And because of that, they are not sent to school. So children in a regular school will not be confronted and will not be made aware of someone with albinism. And because of that, not being educated, it then flows into the working environment by not being in a specific position, maybe in a working environment, but rather performing some work that is very low, like on a minimum wage, which is usually in the sun. And again, exposing the person to something that will cause their death eventually.
You mentioned that a lot of school children have never, for example, seen someone with albinism. Surely that would impact in the workplace as well. I mean, imagine this teenager or young adult going into the workplace and then seeing someone that they've never encountered before and how they would react. Like, I can't even imagine the sort of misconceptions that would stem from something like that.
Yes, exactly. That's a very good example of just not being
aware of everything.
Yes.
Now, in your experience, how do social stigma and systemic barriers almost intersect for people with albinism?
I think the fact that we are unaware about the position of someone with albinism and even someone with a disability in general, that we are uneducated and that information is not available to someone has the consequence that our environments are not accessible to someone, for example, with albinism. Let's say, for example, someone with albinism experience issues with eyesight, or the lighting in the office is very important for them to be able to focus on something. Let's say, for example, because of the fact that I'm uneducated about someone with albinism, I will not have those mechanisms in place because I don't know what kind of accommodations this person would need. And the same with a working environment where someone has to work outside in the sun. If I'm not aware and I have the stigma, I discriminate against this person based on whatever reason it may be, it causes that person not be able to have access to a working environment that is inclusive in nature,
Mm-hmm.
and then exposing them to occupational risks, such as, for example, being exposed to the UV rays of the sun.
I can't even imagine the types of challenges they would face in the workplace and like every day. How does the current legal framework in South Africa support or even fall short in support when it comes to supporting those with albinism?
So I'm going to address this from a perspective of when we look at disabilities. And
Okay.
when I say disabilities, I just want to make sure, just to make it clear that persons with albinism do not necessarily see themselves as someone with a disability.
Mm-hmm.
But for purposes of a legal framework, it's important just to bring it under that umbrella for protection, specifically impairment-wise, if we look at their eyesight and maybe perhaps their health issues that relate to cancer. So currently, our legislation in South Africa do not cater specifically for persons with disabilities. There is no dedicated piece of legislation that only focuses on disability. There's now a new bill that's on the table, but it's been highly criticized because of the fact that it did not include conversations by persons with disabilities, which does not make sense at all. But I'm not going to elaborate on that bill. Okay, so that's not my purpose of today.
It's a conversation for another day.
So what we do find is if we look at our constitution and we look at our Employment Equity Act, it provides for you should not discriminate unfairly against someone on the basis of disability. It only mentions disability. And then we have a guideline document that supports the Employment Equity Act, but it explains reasonable accommodation and disabilities in the context of affirmative action. It does not explain it outside of that context. So we fail in South Africa extremely to the extent of how far does an employer have to, for example, go to accommodate someone? What is the extent of the employer's duty to accommodate someone with a disability and someone with albinism? What is the limitation of that duty to accommodate? So when we say an employer should not have unjustifiable hardship, what does that mean? And that is not clear. So unfortunately, and hopefully with the new bill and changes that will be brought about in the future, I don't know how long that will take, it will be addressed. But currently, our occupational health and safety, for example, also do not cater for aspects such as how to accommodate someone with albinism in the working environment. It does not elaborate on that. And then we have the Labour Relations Act that provides for dismissal for someone for incapacity and for if you would, for example, not be able to perform your job well. So in that regard, it only guides you as to what is the procedure when you dismiss someone, to follow the correct procedure when you dismiss someone to make that a fair dismissal. And unfortunately, beyond that, we have the specific act that deals with hate speech, and it mentions albinism there. So that is something that is unique in South Africa. It's a new act. It only came into effect recently, and it provides for that when you would, for example, speak in a certain way towards someone on the basis of albinism, it can constitute hate speech.
Okay.
And that is basically what the law provides for. So as you can see, we do not have a legal framework. And it's so sad to know that this is a vulnerable group, and it's a group that forms part of a previously disadvantaged group and continues to experience severe discrimination and unique discrimination in their working environments, in life in general.
Now, the issue of racial classification often complicates access to equity provisions for people with albinism, like you've touched on. Can you explain how this impacts, for example, like real life inclusion?
In my research that I've done, I have noticed that when we talk about race and color, a lot of times people see that as the same thing, but it's actually two different things. Color and race do not always overlap. It can be that it can overlap. And that is the issue that occurs in the instance of someone with albinism. So according to the Employment Equity Act, it provides that the employer has a duty to implement affirmative action measures for the designated groups. And within the designated groups category, we have persons with disabilities, Black people, and then women. So if you're not classified under Black people, and when we talk about Black people in that context, it defines it further by mentioning Africans, colors, and it's been amended also recently, the Employment Equity Act. But when the person with albinism, which, for example, when their color of their skin do not overlap with their race, for example, it could be an issue for that person to gain access to affirmative action policy. So unfortunately, our courts have not had too many, or has not had a lot of cases that deal with color discrimination. So I think as soon as we have more case law that deals with that, it will also provide some clarity in this regard. But with my research, that is one of the obstacles that I've identified for someone with albinism.
Before we continue with the rest of the interview, here's a quick look at how Training Portal empowers individuals and businesses through skills development. We are excited to share with you how we can support your business's growth with our expertly designed training solutions. At Training Portal, we are proud to be a leader in skills development consulting and a multi-accredited training academy, committed to solving your unique challenges through innovative and cost-effective solutions. Whether you are looking to enhance your team's skills, comply with industry regulations, or maximize your BEE scores, our extensive range of over 300 short courses and more than 30 fully accredited qualifications cover all your needs. From agriculture to information technology, our CETA and QCTO accredited qualifications are designed to provide comprehensive learning experiences. We here at Training Portal understand that every organization is unique. That is why we tailor our training programs to fit your specific requirements, ensuring maximum benefits within your available resources. Our innovative learning platform allows for flexible, self-paced study, available both on-site at your premises and through our Training Portal campuses all across South Africa. Our process is straightforward yet impactful. Starting with a detailed consultation, we develop bespoke solutions that align with your training, financial, and BEE objectives. Success stories from our clients across 18 industries are a testament to our commitment. With Training Portal, you achieve more than your training outcomes. You gain a partner who stands by you from the initial consultation through to the continuous management of your training program. We cater to a wide array of training needs with meticulously crafted solutions. Beyond our main campuses, we have also developed a community campus initiative, bridging the education gap in rural and disadvantaged areas. Through partnerships with forward-thinking companies, we provide accessible, accredited training and rapid learning courses, directly empowering these communities. This initiative not only fosters local talent and meets the partner's skills development objectives, but also contributes significantly to the socio-economic upliftment of the areas we serve, embodying our belief in the transformative power of education for all. Now let's get back into the episode. Now, media is huge in the world. Okay, I mean, we're talking TV, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. It often shapes the perception of any group of people very powerfully. How do you think people with albinism are portrayed, and what would you like to see done differently?
I think if you would do a search on persons with albinism and you look at the images that come up, you usually see an African child that has albinism. And I think that is also a misconception, because albinism can occur in any type of person. It's not only in African culture. And I think that is the first misconception that occurs. And then the images that we find is often relates to violence. And it's not always it relates to an impactful image that you would see, or the information that is shared on social media always relates to either witchcraft or violence that relate to persons with albinism. We rarely see any form of media coverage that covers, for example, the fact that what good has been done. And if I would, for example, see the United Nations there's currently a specific document that you can sign, a petition that you can sign regarding how to add what do you call it, like your skin protection, your sunscreen, where how sunscreen should be added to the essential medication list. So have you ever heard of that?
No.
Exactly. You see how that information is not shared on public platforms. So I'm following a lot of albinism societies and a lot of platforms that does obviously work for advocacy for persons with albinism. So that specific petition is something that you can sign online, but that is something good, like trying to achieve a change in this world. And the United Nations independent expert, currently it's their 10-year mandate, and they have to report on what they've been doing over the past 10 years in relation to albinism. And that information is also, you will only find it on the platforms that speaks on behalf of persons with albinism. You don't find the media actually sharing that news on a public platform. And I would love to see how universities, for example, would also just raise awareness of the stigma that relates to persons with albinism, and that there are so many different ways in how you can break down barriers, and using social media and using any form of information sharing is a way in how you can break down those barriers and make sure that you have access to the correct information. And I think that's very important.
That is important. I was about to say, because you can have access to any sort of information, but making sure it's the correct and relevant information is so important when it comes to topics like this.
Definitely. I agree.
Now, you are working on a book at the moment, and you are planning an international conference on albinism in October of this year of 2025. Can you share more about these exciting projects?
Oh, I would love to. So, as I indicated, I'm part of the disability rights unit of the Faculty of Law, and part of the unit strategy is to make sure that we focus on different types of disabilities and ensure inclusion of different groups. So in 2024, we had a roundtable discussion with stakeholders from different organizations on the topic of albinism. And at that specific roundtable discussion, we identified issues relating to the right to access to education and the right to access to healthcare, and how persons with albinism experience difficulties in actually having access to those things. So we identified a whole range of topics, and from that discussion, we identified topics for a book. And in this book, we are really making it a very unique experience, like with personal experiences of persons with albinism, so that it can actually demonstrate their true realities. So we even have an artist that will be an artist with albinism who will be illustrating her life experiences by way of her artwork.
Oh, lovely.
So it's so amazing. And as indicated that she would love to also do the cover of the book. So it's going to be such a personal book, but the book will also elaborate on an African and an international level. What are the experiences specifically in relation to legal instruments and your basic human rights, having access to education and access to medical care. So that is the basis of the book. And then we realized that we have to raise awareness on top of this discussion, the roundtable discussion, because the roundtable discussion was it was a small roundtable discussion with only stakeholders, so that we have the voices of persons with albinism, not those that are not affected by albinism. So because I can only go as far as how I can perceive this, because I don't experience that myself. And so that's why we decided on a conference, an international conference. And this conference will be held in October, like you mentioned. And our focus at this conference would be the United Nations Sustainable Goals, and trying to see as to by 2030, how will access to healthcare, access to legal instruments, your basic human rights, how can we look at 5 years from now? how will the law look different? How will access to healthcare look different? So it's a futuristic approach to see as to how can things change to ensure that by 2030 that we are more aligned with the sustainable goals. And the goals they are international. So that's why we've brought that together. And I think it's going to be an amazing opportunity to have different stakeholders engaged, especially if we look at healthcare. I'm just using an example now, yeah. But like traditional healers, are they educated on the fact and that it's actually a crime if you would, for example, sell body parts of someone with albinism? It's incredible. It's such an interesting, not interesting, it's such an amazing, just a topic, and it's just, it has so many different elements. So it's so difficult to touch on everything. So yeah, it's just a wonderful opportunity to be part of.
But if anyone is wanting to almost see what it's about and that, we'll make sure that all the links are added to the bio of the video. So you can go and have a look for yourself, get a better idea of what the conference is about. Because I know if we were to get you started on it, we might be here all day. So tell me, what policy changes do you believe are the most urgently needed to better accommodate and even protect people with albinism, especially in the workplace?
I think policy changes relate to reasonable accommodation. I think that is a very, very important topic that needs addressed, so that employers would need to know that what is required from the employer in order to accommodate someone. And I think universal design in general is something that should be considered by any employer, because when you make something accessible, when you make a working environment accessible by way of reasonable accommodation, you don't only serve an individual, you serve the whole society. If I can just use a basic example of stairs to a building, as soon as you include a ramp, you make it accessible to elder people. So it's not only someone in a wheelchair that will have access, but someone who has mobility issues in general. So you, by way of making sure that accommodation is implemented in a working environment, it can clear up a lot of issues. So I think having clarity on that and making sure as to that employers are aware as to what is required will have a definite impact. So I think the bill that is currently under review is something that we should just, we should keep that in mind and see what happens there. And I think it was very important now to see what the public's reaction was towards the bill, to see as how they felt that persons with albinism were, for example, persons with disability, were not considered in the conversation. And that is very, very important, that when we address policy and we make changes, it must be the voices of persons with disabilities need to be heard. And that is very important, to include them in the conversation.
That is, I mean, who else is it going to impact? It's not going to impact anyone but them. So absolutely, they need to be included in that conversation. Now, in a country like South Africa that is still grappling with economic pressure and competing priorities, how do we make sure that this is a space for meaningful disability inclusion?
I think our culture makes it very unique. And if we think about Ubuntu, and it's just something unique to South Africa. And I think we can learn a lot of valuable lessons from Ubuntu. And if I would think back to the COVID time and where we were grappling with financial implications as well, COVID actually taught us a lot of valuable lessons in the space of reasonable accommodation, so that employers can actually, and companies can actually, by just changing policies and allowing work from home, for example, can circumvent the costs element that's involved with accommodating a working environment. So let's say we have a small company that do not have the funds to, for example, change a space or whatever the case may be, that they will be able, if the person can work from home, to change the policy to accommodate that person. And then it will have no financial impact. But I think the other aspect that's very important, which we tend to forget, is that the employer should consult with the employees in the working environment. The employer should actually have them actively involved in the conversation. And what I've picked up now from recent case law is that persons with disabilities, when they are employed, they do not share the impact that their disability has on their life or their impairment. And the same with persons with albinism, because they fear losing their job or not being appointed. And that is a real issue as well, because if your employer is unaware of what you need, they will not be able to accommodate you. And I think as soon as you are part of the conversation, you can make it clear to the employer that actually, when you accommodate me, it doesn't cost that much. These are examples of how I can be accommodated, because every person will be unique. And I think it also has to do with if the rest of the employees see that, oh, this employer actually considers every individual in the working environment, it increases the job satisfaction and your productivity also increases. So I think on the bigger scale, you have to look at a lot of things, not only that individual and our financial restraints at the moment. And I think not being educated about what accommodation is and how it can benefit a company really has an impact. It plays a big role.
So you briefly touched on the financial implications for employers, but now what about the reverse of that? What would be the financial incentives for employers be, like tax breaks or a realistic way to promote accessibility and equality?
There is tax relief available for learnership allowances currently that we have available in South Africa. But the new bill also speaks about tax relief. So I think there will be some form of incentive coming in eventually when we have the new piece of legislation. So which is very good, because it is almost like rewarding the employer for accommodating someone. But on the other hand, from my personal point of view, you shouldn't reward someone for actually just accommodating your employees at the workplace. But if you need something to actually get employers to accommodate employees at the workplace, that is a very good way of doing that. So other countries in the world also make use of such incentives and tax relief, and by way of awarding or rewarding the employers or companies that implement reasonable accommodation measures.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, and what about for people with albinism who are seeking to access education or employment? What sort of practical steps or even resources can help support their path?
From a perspective of someone who's going into a job, and I think what is very important is education, but we also find that a lot of persons are they are very skilled, but then they can't find a job because they're overqualified as well. So, but it's still important to also align what you can do, what your strengths are, and then also focusing on that. So being intentional with that. So education is important. And then also surrounding yourself with a network. So networking is very important. And you know, like in life, it really it's who you know. And if you have a network of people who can, for example, provide you with opportunities, they will seek inclusive employers. So you need to also follow employers that are really that embraces inclusivity, that is really aimed at accommodating persons with disabilities, persons with albinism, and making sure that they are accommodated. Another important aspect would be to also surround yourself with people who can mentor you and can really support you in what you want to achieve. Because if you don't have a mentor or you don't have a specific network of people that can support you in that regard, it becomes difficult. So I think those would be my best advice for someone who, and also something else that I was thinking of now is someone with albinism need to share their experiences with others to get away with these misconceptions and share what they need, what they require in a working environment, what affects them, I just want to mention this, like, for example, your skin why do I keep on forgetting sunscreen? There we go, sunscreen. Like they need the highest sunscreen that there is. And imagine you don't have a solid income and you need that because your life depends on that.
And that's expensive.
It like costs about 400 Rand for 3 days of coverage of.
Goodness.
Imagine the cost involved just to have a livelihood. And it's those type of things that we are not aware of. And a person who experiences albinism on a daily basis would be someone who would be able to inform others. So it's very important to share knowledge and to educate others around you, just to raise awareness. I think that's also very important to break down those barriers.
Absolutely. Now, how can everyday people, like our listeners who are listening to us today, help become allies towards albinism? And the albinism community and, actively contribute towards change?
So my first example would be the link that I just spoke. So I think it would be great to add that link to your podcast. Yes.
All links in the bio, don't worry.
So you can add your signature to that and just open the door for just providing your support in getting access to essential medication. And then there are so many alliances for persons with albinism that you can follow on LinkedIn, you can follow them on Facebook, and by following them, you're actually supporting them, because then you engage with information, because they share a lot of information on there. And if only persons with albinism follow them and engage with them, it has no impact. So you can, as a person not living with albinism, you can actually embrace and assist and make an impact by sharing the knowledge that you have acquired on different platforms with your colleagues. And if you, let's say, for example, you are in human resources, by implementing those policies, that information into your policies in the working environment, that's just a typical example. Something else would be, you can partner with institutions such as, for example, the University of the Free State's Disability Rights Unit, and become actively involved with our projects. And by doing that, you act as an advocate on behalf of persons with albinism and in general on persons with disabilities. Yes.
I must say it was absolutely enlightening to chat with you today. You have opened my eyes to things that I wasn't even aware of. And I know that there are a lot of listeners today who are in the same boat as me, who were watching this and, did not know about all these challenges. So thank you so much for the work that you are doing and shedding the light on the topic of albinism in the way that you have.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I really feel honored to be able to be part of this research and to be able just to try to make a change and just put a voice to this vulnerable group. So thank you so much for having me.
This episode was proudly recorded and produced at Old Mountain Studios in Cape Town. For more information, visit their website at www.oldmountainstudios.co.za. Next time on the Training Portal podcast.
The side where long form generally, it's a bit slower paced. The teams are built and they work for a much longer period. It's just better structured. And there's your parameters and limitations and your variables, everything is in front of you, where there's a lot of stakeholders as well on the commercial side. You can have an agency involved, you can have then a client involved. Sometimes you have 2 tiers of clients involved, and approvals, and because everything's happening so fast and there's little setbacks where a stakeholder changes their mind.
Then
so it's unpredictable in that way.